Welcome to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY Radio.
A health promotion show brought to you by VIU nursing students.
Over the next hour, we will be demystifying health issues.
Thanks for tuning in.
Feliz Navidad, Joyeux Noel, Happy Hanukkah, Habari Gani if you celebrate Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, and Happy Holidays, Vancouver Island. A Sound Constitution was feeling festive and put together a little Yuletide show for you to keep you healthy and happy this winter solstice. And no matter how you celebrate, I think we can all agree this time of year is about making the world a better place. So, to keep Krampus at bay, we've got Sophia and Julia starting off the show with some tips on how to stay healthy this holiday season.
'Tis the season to be healthy. You are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY Radio, and I'm talking unfestive fevers. You are Christmas ready. Your tree is decorated, menu planned, stockings stuffed. But have you thought about how to escape potential health dangers during this season? According to a BBC News report, there are more deaths in winter than any other time of the year, with causes such as respiratory and circulatory diseases and infections like the flu. There are 5 times as many emergency admissions for pneumonia in December compared to August, and cold weather also triggers a rise in asthma problems. There are more cases of norovirus, or the winter vomiting bug, around than in recent years, but we're a long way off of our peak of early 2010. Colds, sore throats, and painful joints are all more prevalent in winter. There are some things you can do to minimize risks. Let's look at one of the most dreaded seasonal infections, the flu. Flu symptoms include a fever, cough, sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, body aches, headaches, chills, and fatigue. Some people may also have vomiting and diarrhea. The Center for Disease Control says take 3 actions to fight the flu. First up, have a flu jab. CDC recommends a yearly flu vaccine as the first and most important step in protecting against flu viruses. While there are many different flu viruses, a flu vaccine protects against the virus that researchers suggest will be the most common. Flu vaccination can reduce flu illnesses, doctor's visits, missed work and school due to the flu, as well as prevent flu-related hospitalizations. Everyone 6 months of age and older should get a flu vaccine every year, hopefully before the flu activity begins in their community. CDC recommends getting vaccinated by the end of October if it's possible. Vaccination of high-risk persons is especially important to decrease their risk of severe flu illness. This includes young children, pregnant women, people with chronic health conditions such as asthma, diabetes, or heart and lung disease, as well as people 65 years and older. Vaccination is also important for healthcare workers and other people who live or care for people with high risk. Children younger than 6 months are high risk as well, but unfortunately they're too young to be vaccinated. So people who care for infants should be vaccinated instead, to create something called herd immunity. This is a phenomenon we nursing students are taught about in class, and essentially it's a form of indirect protection from infectious diseases that occur when a large percentage of the population becomes immune to an infection, thereby providing measures of protection for the individuals who are not vaccinated. Step 2 is to take everyday preventative actions to stop the spread of germs. This is things such as trying to avoid close contact with sick people, and if you are sick, try to limit your contact with people as much as possible to keep from infecting them. If you are sick with the flu symptoms, the CDC recommends that you stay home for at least 24 hours after your fever is gone. This is of course except to get the medical care that you need. Cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you sneeze or cough, and remember, throw this tissue away after you've used it. Wash your hands often with soap and water, and if these aren't available, you can use an alcohol-based hand rub as well. Try to avoid touching your eyes, your nose, or your mouth as germs are spread this way, and clean and disinfect surfaces and objects that may be contaminated with germs. Third and lastly, you can take a flu antiviral drug if your doctor prescribes them. If the unfortunate event hits and you get the flu, antiviral drugs can be used to treat your illness. These are different from antibiotics. They are prescription medicines, so they're not available over the counter. Antiviral drugs can make illness milder and shorter from the time that you were sick. They may also prevent serious flu complications. This can make the difference between having a mild illness versus a very serious illness that could result in a hospital stay. Studies show that antiviral drugs work best for treatment when they are started within 2 days of getting sick. But starting them later could also be helpful, especially if the sick person has a high risk or is very sick from the flu. But remember, follow your doctor's instructions for taking this drug. Well, that's all from me. Hope this helps you avoid the dreaded illness of the season, and have a holly, jolly, healthy holiday.
Hello, listeners. This is Julia here talking about mental health during the holiday and winter seasons. HealthLink BC has some great resources for mental health during these winter months. Here's what they have to say about depression and seasonal affective disorder. When you're depressed, holidays can be hard. They may bring up bad memories, or you may feel as if you're outside looking in at people who are having a good time. But if you can, try to take part in some holiday events. It may make you feel better. Here are some tips for dealing with the holidays. Try to spend time with friends and do things you enjoy, not only things you feel you have to do. Get plenty of rest. The better you feel, the better a holiday can be. Think about others. Helping those less fortunate than you can make you feel better. Get money off your mind. Money problems are a leading cause of holiday depression. Focus on the spirit of the season. Watch what you eat and drink. Eat healthy foods, watch your portion sizes, and avoid alcohol. Remember, be realistic. Try not to build up the holiday too much in your mind. Say no sometimes. People will understand if you don't do things. Wearing yourself out will make you feel worse. It's okay to be sad or lonely. You don't have to be happy just because it's the holiday season. Get help if you need it. Seek out family or friends for support. Community or church groups can help too. If things get bad, talk with your doctor or counselor. As the days are getting shorter and daylight is becoming more of a scarce commodity, I think it's important to talk a little bit about seasonal affective disorder. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a type of depression that occurs during the same season each year. You may have SAD if you felt depressed during the last 2 winters, but felt much better in spring and summer. Some people may have SAD during the summer months. Anyone can get SAD, but it's more common in women, people who live far from the equator, where winter daylight hours are very short, people ages 15 to 55, people who have a close relative with SAD. Seasonal affective disorder is sometimes called winter depression or seasonal depression. Experts aren't sure what causes seasonal affective disorder, but they think it may be caused by a lack of sunlight. Lack of light may upset your biological clock, which controls your sleep-wake pattern and other circadian rhythms, cause problems with serotonin, a brain chemical that affects mood. If you have seasonal affective disorder, you may feel sad, grumpy, moody, or anxious, lose interest in your usual activities, eat more and crave carbohydrates such as bread and pasta, gain weight, sleep more but still feel tired, and have trouble concentrating. Symptoms come and go at about the same time each year. Most people with SAD start to have symptoms in September or October and feel better by April or May. Light therapy is the main treatment for seasonal affective disorder. Medications and counseling may also help. Experts think that light therapy works by resetting your biological clock. It helps most people who have seasonal affective disorder, and it's easy to use. There are 2 types of light therapy: bright light treatment. For this treatment, you place the light box at a certain distance from you on a desk or table, then you sit in front of it while you read, eat breakfast, or work at a computer. Or dawn stimulation. For this treatment, a dim light goes on in the morning while you sleep, and it gets brighter over time, like a sunrise. Talk to your doctor about light therapy and follow the steps that he or she recommends. Supplementing your vitamin D intake and maintaining a healthy exercise regimen are other ways that people deal with seasonal affective disorder. If you think that you're experiencing seasonal affective disorder or depression, speak to your healthcare provider to find treatment that works best for you. That's all for me.
Ho, ho, ho! Happy holidays! You're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY in Nanaimo.
That was Julia and Sophia with tips on how to stay healthy this holiday season. Up next, we've got a musical interlude to recognize diversity and various celebrations around the holiday season. We hope you enjoy Hanukkah Oy Hanukkah from Dan Nadell and Friends.
Yemei oi Hanukkah, oi Hanukkah, ayont v'shem, a lustige Freiliche, nito noch Sonne, alle Nacht in Dreilich spielen, so de Kaiser Latges essen mir, geschwinder sind Kinder, die denen lichterlich zogt al hanissen läuft Gott fahr die Nissen und kommt gehe tanzen in Korn zogt al hanissen läuft Gott fahr die Nissen und kommt gehe tanzen kommt. Lustige, freiliche, nito noch Sonne, alle Nacht in Drehlich spielen wir, zu der Käselatges essen wir, geschwinder sind Kinder, die denen gelichterlich zogt all Hanissem Gott vor die Nissem und kommt kicher tanzen kommt. Zogt all Hanissem und Gott vor die Nissem und kommt kicher tanzen kommt. Zogt all Hanissem läuft Gott vor die Nissem und kommt kicher tanzen
That was Hanukkah Oi Hanukkah from Dan Nadell and Friends. Speaking of diversity and learning about other cultures, next we'll hear about the story of Kwanzaa. Enjoy.
Now you may have heard of Kwanzaa, that celebration that coincides with Christmas and Hanukkah. You may have even been to a Kwanzaa celebration. In the 80s and 90s, Kwanzaa was everywhere. But do you really know what this holiday is about and why it started? Let's jump back a few decades. In 1965, tensions between black communities and law enforcement reached a boiling point, and Los Angeles saw the most violent urban riot in 20 years. As the Watts riots unfolded around him, LA-based PhD student and activist Maulana Karenga saw an opportunity to restore unity in black communities and foster African American cultural institutions, values, and traditions. So in 1966, Karenga created Kwanzaa with the purpose to help connect black Americans to their African roots and with each other in the face of marginalization. In fact, the name Kwanzaa even comes from a Swahili phrase, Matunda ya Kwanzaa, meaning first fruits. Karenga decided that this new holiday should fall in the 7-day period between Christmas and New Year's. He even added a second A on the end of Kwanzaa to represent each of these 7 days. Each day represents a different principle: unity, self-determination, collective responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. During Kwanzaa, Karenga wanted communities to celebrate by gathering together to light candles and to join in a huge communal feast called Karamu, inspired by a Zulu harvest celebration. Every celebration is different, but generally, families come together to light a kinara, read poetry, and dance to traditional African songs. Karenga traveled the country spreading the word about this new holiday. It then gained momentum through schools and colleges, and pretty soon, families started adopting Kwanzaa into their yearly celebrations. At first, many African American Christians were opposed to Kwanzaa, as they didn't want it to be a replacement for Christmas. But as Kwanzaa became more popular in the late 1960s, black churches began to embrace it, and the holiday became a supplement rather than an alternative to Christmas. Some churches even organized Kwanzaa celebrations. But Kwanzaa really took off in the 1970s as the black middle class started to grow. After the 1964 Civil Rights Act outlawed race-based discrimination in employment, the number of African American middle-income earners increased dramatically and continued to grow into the 1980s and 90s. As black families started to move into white suburban areas, they began to feel isolated, and Kwanzaa became a way for them to reconnect to their history and culture. By 1995, the holiday was celebrated by an estimated 10 million Americans, compared to just a few hundred when it was founded. With Kwanzaa's cemented popularity, it didn't take long for corporate America to notice. By the mid-1990s, an entire industry had formed around the holiday. Companies like Heineken even created an advertisement around Kwanzaa's 7 principles. The slogan read, "Unity, purpose, creativity, faith. Heineken beer is proud to celebrate Kwanzaa and everything it stands for." This was something that Karenga had specifically sought to avoid, saying the challenge for the African people is to avoid the problems of commercialization that they've learned from other holidays like Christmas. In fact, one of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa is the importance of a self-sustaining, cooperative economy between African Americans, one that emphasizes black-owned businesses and discourages mass commercialization. But Kwanzaa's mass marketing appeal was somewhat short-lived. By the mid-2000s, paraphernalia started to disappear from shelves, and many adherents abandoned the holiday as a yearly tradition. Today, only 2% of Americans are believed to celebrate Kwanzaa, despite the fact that African Americans now make up 13% of the population. After 5 decades, Kwanzaa still stands as an important reminder of the historic challenges that Black America has overcome, and it still remains a uniting force for millions.
That was a clip with a quick overview of the history of Kwanzaa. Just a reminder that the health information we provide should never substitute that of your primary healthcare provider. Next, we'll hear from one of my favorite bands, the Shins, with their take on the Christmas song equivalent to an ugly sweater. Wonderful Christmas time. So bad it's good?
The mood is right, the spirit's up, we're here tonight, and that's enough. The party's on, the feeling's here, it only comes this time of year. We're simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. The word is out about Christmas time.
That was The Shins with a cover of Wonderful Christmas Time.
Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays. You're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY in Nanaimo.
Brain formation!
For today's Brain Formation, here is a fun holiday clip from Ted Ed where Carlos Rafe explains the tradition of why we kiss under mistletoe.
The sight of mistletoe may either send you scurrying, or if you have your eye on someone, awaiting an opportunity beneath its snow-white berries. But how did the festive Christmas tradition of kissing under mistletoe come about? The long-lived custom intertwines the mythology and biology of this intriguing plant. There are more than 1,000 species of mistletoe, which grows the world over. In fact, the ancient Europeans were so captivated by the plant's unusual growth habits that they included it in their legends and myths. In ancient Rome, Pliny the Elder described how the Druid priesthood in ancient England believed that mistletoe was a plant dropped down from heaven by the gods. That explained its unlikely position amongst the high branches of certain trees. They also believed it had powers of healing and bestowing fertility. Meanwhile, Scandinavian legend told of the plant's mystical qualities in the story of the god Balder and his adoring mother, Frigga, goddess of love, marriage, and fertility. Frigga loved her son so much that she commanded every plant, animal, and inanimate object to vow they'd never harm him. In her fervor, however, she overlooked the mistletoe. The mischievous god Loki realized this oversight and pierced Balder's heart with an arrow carved from a mistletoe branch. Frigga cried tears of such sadness that they formed the mistletoe's pearly berries, making the other gods pity her and agree to resurrect Balder. Hearing the news, Frigga became so overjoyed that she transformed the mistletoe from a symbol of death into one of peace and love. She mandated a one-day truce for all fights, and that everyone embrace beneath its branches when they passed, to spread more love into the world. In the 17th century, British colonists arriving in the New World found a different but very similar-looking species of mistletoe. They applied it to these tales of magic, fertility, and love, spreading the mistletoe-hanging tradition from Europe into America. By the 18th century, people in Britain had turned this into a Christmas tradition. But this custom comes down to more than just human imagination. All of it was inspired by the plant's intriguing biology. We see mistletoe as a festive decoration, but draped on tree boughs in the wild, it's known as a partly parasitic plant. Mistletoe relies on modified roots called haustoria that penetrate the tree bark and siphon off the water and minerals trees carry up their trunks. To colonize nearby trees with its seeds, mistletoe depends on birds and other creatures to do the dispersing. Birds that eat the mistletoe's sticky white berries sometimes get rid of the gluey seeds by wiping them off onto tree bark, or with a bit of luck, they excrete the indigestible seed onto a tree, where it germinates and starts to grow. With its resilience and foliage that stays lush even while the surrounding trees lose their leaves, you can see why mistletoe captivated our superstitious ancestors. They saw these as signs of the plant's magical qualities and fertility. Even today, the mistletoe inspires wonder with the diversity of wildlife it supports. More than just a parasite, it's also known as a keystone species. It's eaten by a diversity of animals, including deer, elk, squirrels, chipmunks, porcupines, robins, bluebirds, mourning doves, and the butterfly genus Dilius. Some mistletoe species produce dense bushes, which are excellent nesting locations for a variety of birds. And despite their parasitic relationship with trees, mistletoes can also help other plants. For instance, juniper sprouts near mistletoe to benefit from the visiting berry-eating birds. Through the many benefits it provides, mistletoe influences diversity and allows ecosystems to flourish. You might even say that for this iconic plant, life imitates legend. In the wild, mistletoe has the power to bring things together, and in our own traditions, we see that happening too.
You're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY Radio, broadcasting out of Nanaimo this holiday season. And that was a clip from Ted Ed with Carlos Rafe explaining the tradition of why we kiss under mistletoe.
Happy holidays, everyone, from A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY in Nanaimo. As a present to the community, I wanted to share one of my favorite resources. It's a new website called Fetch BC. It's a resource brought to you by the Nanaimo Division of Family Practice. And it's basically an archive of all the community health resources in the area. Everything from health professionals, low-income support, social services, mental health, seniors, and so much more. For more information, visit fetchbc.ca. Have a wonderful and happy holidays and stay safe and healthy, Vancouver Island.
Time for some holistic healthcare. It may be the season to be jolly, but it can also take its toll, mentally and physically, on our health and well-being. Eating, drinking, and the odd party here and there equals rich, plentiful food, alcohol, and late nights, all of which, particularly if done in excess, can affect our health. There's also so much to do before Christmas. Food to organize and prepare, presents to buy, places to go, people to see. Christmas can be stressful. You can help yourself by avoiding great excess of food and drinks when possible, and try to do some moderate exercise. Take time, even 5 minutes if that's all you've got, to do things that you enjoy. Perhaps some deep breathing exercises. Sometimes, though, we all need a little extra help, and that's where Thrive on the Island can come in. This is a holistic healthcare resource. They have midwives, holistic practitioners, chiropractors, osteopaths, and body workers of all kinds. If you feel like you could use the extra holistic attention this Christmas season, check them out. www.thriveontheisland.ca.
As nursing students, I think a lot of us have come to view community resources as a gift. And here is one we have become familiar with over the last year at A Sound Constitution. The First Nations Health Authority. For information about health services and programming for First Nations in British Columbia, contact the First Nations Health Authority toll-free at 1-800-317-7878. Jordan's story. Jordan River Anderson was a 5-year-old First Nations child from Norway House Cree Nation in Manitoba. He was born in 1999 with a rare disorder that required hospitalization from birth. After spending the first 2 years of his life in a hospital, doctors felt he could receive care in a medically trained family home near the hospital. However, over the next couple of years, the federal and provincial government could not resolve who was financially responsible for the necessary at-home care. After spending over 2 years in hospital without cause while governments disputed who should pay for his at-home care, Jordan died in 2005, having never been able to leave the hospital and receive treatment in a home. On December 12, 2007, the House of Commons supported a motion that affirms Jordan's principle, a Child First principle named in memory of Jordan. With recent court rulings, Jordan's principle is now law. So what is Jordan's principle? Jordan's principle is meant to prevent First Nations children from being denied essential services or experiencing delays in receiving them. This principle applies to all First Nations children, applies to all government services to ensure there are no gaps in government services to First Nations children, provides payment for needed services by the government or department that first receives the request. The First Nations Health Authority is responsible for administering Jordan's principle resources in British Columbia. This approach, however, does not limit or relieve the federal government of its fiduciary responsibilities to First Nations in BC. To support Jordan's principle, the Government of Canada is working to 1. Resolve situations where governments and departments cannot agree about who should pay for services and supports to meet the needs of a First Nations child. 2. Cover the costs for health and social services and supports for First Nations children in situations when a First Nations child does not have access to a publicly funded program usually available to other children. And 3, facilitate access to all services and supports for all First Nations children without delay or disruption. For more about Jordan's principle and for information about health services and programming for First Nations in British Columbia, contact the First Nations Health Authority toll-free at 1-800-317-7878. Another great resource that comes to mind offers support for parents. Being a parent is rewarding, but it can be hard too. If you need to talk, support is a phone call away. Call the First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. Speaking of parents, the holiday season often involves visiting with family. Families, as the heart of a community, play an important role in encouraging and maintaining healthy lifestyles. Up next, we've got a clip from Crash Course about family obligations.
For most of you, your parents brought you into this world. They also fed you and changed your diapers and wiped away your tears. They raised you. Yet, according to contemporary American philosopher Jane English, once you're grown, you don't owe your parents anything. Not a single thing. Now, this might sound a little selfish, a little ungrateful, a little mean, but let's hear her out. Because you've learned by now that many of your default attitudes, the attitudes that you think you have about other beings and your relationships to them, have a hard time standing up to philosophical scrutiny. So let's scrutinize one of the most important relationships you have in your life, the one that you've had the longest and probably the most intimate one you'll ever have. Let's talk about your folks. There are three basic views about the obligations you have to your parents. One is the unconditional view. This is the view that simply by virtue of being your parent, that person is entitled to certain things from you. At a bare minimum, your presence and attention in their lives, until one of you dies. By contrast, the conditional view says that you owe your parents based on what they gave you. So really terrible parents might not deserve anything from their grown children, but good parents deserve quite a lot. So your level of obligation is based on the amount of benefit that you received growing up. And finally, there's English's view, known as the friendship view. This says that you don't actually owe your parents anything once you've grown, regardless of how much you benefited from their parenting. Many of us take it as basic, that we owe our parents a lot, what with all of the feeding and nurturing and driving to soccer games and acting like they enjoyed our macaroni art. But English makes a couple of observations about this assumption. First, she says, if anything, it's the parents who owe their kids. After all, if you choose to have a child, you incur a huge responsibility to raise that child, or to give it away to someone who will. So it's basically a contractarian relationship. If you agree to do something, then you have a duty to see it through, or to extract yourself from the contract. And that is the line of reasoning that leads English to conclude that grown kids don't owe their parents back. Because none of us chose to be born, and you can't have an obligation if you didn't do something to incur that obligation. Now you might be thinking, fine, if you want to think of family relationships in terms of contracts, then isn't there still an implicit contract between child and parent? If you've reaped the benefits of being raised by good, loving parents, doesn't it mean that you've implicitly accepted the contract and have therefore incurred obligations? The problem with that is children can't really enter into moral contracts. If as an adult you enter into an agreement with your parents, like you can live at home for free as long as you maintain your grades in college, then you got yourself a contract. But any benefits incurred while growing up don't count, because back when the relationship started, you were just a baby and you didn't have the rational capacity to be held to a moral contract. And what's more, your parents didn't provide for you with the expectation of a payout. They had you, or they kept you, or adopted you because they wanted you, and they gave to you because they wanted to. Good parents give unconditionally, so no matter how much you receive from them, you simply don't incur debt, because that's not how family works. Now, to be clear, English isn't giving us a pass to freeload off our parents. She thinks that if you have a good relationship with your parents, you'll probably want to help them out when you can, but that's not an obligation. Instead, she says, the appropriate model is friendship. Friends don't keep score, they help each other out of love, and in loving relationships, no one's keeping a hidden tally of who helped last and who's due to help next. You don't have to keep score. You give simply because you want to, out of love. So English argues that once you're an adult, your relationship with your parents should model that of friendship. And the thing about friends is, if the love isn't there, the friendship dissolves. You have no underlying obligation to remain friends with someone. And likewise, if you had bad parents, or if you simply don't care about them once you're an adult, you have no obligation to give them anything, including your time. You didn't incur a debt by being raised, she says. So just like with friendship, you can choose choose not to maintain a relationship with your parents. It's up to you. Now, this attitude might seem scandalous to some people. I mean, isn't blood thicker than water? Well, many philosophers challenge the idea that you have special obligations to someone just because you share some genetic material with them. By that logic, a person who was adopted at birth would have obligations to biological relatives that they've never met, and they wouldn't have any obligations to the family that raised them. And I think most of us can agree that that doesn't make any sense. We tend to think of adopted families as being no less familial than biological families. So if you think families are built through love and not blood, then it follows that families lacking in love can't make moral demands on its members because they simply don't have the standing. While we're talking about parents here, let's stop by the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Before you're trusted to do something that has the potential to cause harm, you have to demonstrate that you can handle it. In most societies, this is done through licensing. Driver's licenses, hunting licenses, wedding licenses, heck, barbers even need to be certified before they can cut your hair. So contemporary American philosopher Hugh La Follette thinks that there's another group of people who should be licensed. Parents. That's right, La Follette thinks potential parents should be required to apply for and obtain a license before being permitted to reproduce. This sounds kind of ridiculous, right? But think about it. Most activities that require competence to do well, and that can cause harm if done badly, are regulated by society. There's no question that parenting isn't easy, and you can really mess up a kid if you do it badly. But right now, we wait until a parent has abused or neglected a child before the state intervenes. So La Follette asks, wouldn't it be better if we took preventative measures instead? After all, adoptive parents undergo heavy scrutiny before they get to have kids. So just like driving a car in La Follette's plan, you'd have to pass a test before you could get a parenting license. There'd be classes for those who need it, and you can always reapply. But if you can't demonstrate a basic ability to raise a child, then you just don't get to have one. What do you think? Would society be better or worse if you needed a license to raise children? Does everyone have the right to be a parent? Or should you have to demonstrate that you're up to the task before you're allowed to bring a new human being into the world? Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, here's yet another perspective on the philosophy of family obligations. Contemporary American philosopher Claudia Mills argues that there's something truly special about what you have with your family. Your family members are the only people in your life that are permanent and unchosen, she says, and because of that, there's value in maintaining a connection with them. Mills points out that we live in a world where we're constantly changing. Most of us will have many different jobs and live in lots of different places and go through a great many friends, maybe even a couple of spouses. But there will come a time when there are very few people left in your life who have known you since the beginning. Mills thinks that your family allows you to stay connected to the person you once were before all those changes happened. And even if you aren't really that person anymore, that connection can be grounding and valuable. So go ahead, call your brother on his birthday. Remind him of the time he tried to dry his socks in a frying pan. In addition to getting a good laugh out of it, your brother might appreciate reconnecting with his roots. Now, you might have noticed this is the first time our discussion of ethics has focused on personal individual connections, on feelings of love rather than on impartiality. This is a characteristic of a school of moral thought known as the ethics of care. Contrary to most of the theories we've studied, this view says that morality demands that we pay attention to special relationships we have in our lives. The ethics of care says that morality goes wrong when we emphasize impartiality, because it's our most caring relationships that make our lives worthwhile. And we want our friends and family to care more for us than they do for strangers, right? So ethicists of care often reason that even though we might have a general love for humanity itself, you just can't beat the unconditional, I would literally die for you love that we only have for the people we know best, the ones with whom we share an intimacy that we simply can't feel with strangers. What could the harm be in that? Well, many ethicists worry that showing preference for the people that you happen to like opens up the door for prejudice, because it's easy to be kind to people you like. You don't need morality to tell you that. The hard part is being kind to people you don't like, or who are different from you, or who you simply don't know or understand very well. It would be great if everyone had a support network of people who love them, so we'd just all take care of our own loved ones and life would be perfect. The problem is there are a lot of people who aren't lucky enough to have support networks of care. And there are others who have people who care about them, but their loved ones lack the resources to actually provide for them. If we rely on ethics of care, it looks like those people will get neglected. But today we talked about moral obligations to family. We considered the possibility of licensing parents, and we talked about the ethics of care and some potential problems that type of approach to morality carries with it.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY in Nanaimo, and we're talking about holiday health. That was a clip from Crash Course about family obligations. Now, we hope not all of your holiday visits are obligatory. It's time for a little Christmas tunage. Next we'll hear from Blitzen Trapper with Christmas is Coming Soon.
10 o'clock and all is well. April Fools, string of shells, countless blanks fired at will. Rocks upon the windowsill. Christmas is coming soon. Steve McQueen, high school girls, blow a kiss, sandy pearls, bullet holes, hidden scars, making love in a stolen car. Christmas is coming soon. Carefully, she climbs up into the tree. The radio sits below in the snow. Fill the night with songs as she waits for dawn. Christmas is coming soon. Christmas is coming soon. Christmas is coming soon. Donkey Kong, candle wax, muddy stains on brand new slacks. 10 o'clock and all is well. Messy hair, jingle bells. Christmas is coming soon.
That was Christmas is Coming Soon by Blitzen Trapper, and you're listening to 101.7 CHLY in Nanaimo.
Hey you!
Who, me?
Yeah, you! We want to hear what you have to say, because
Your opinion matters!
Next, we've got a clip from TransCare BC where they ask people to share their experiences, what trans inclusion means to them, what is exciting about recommendations, what else is needed, and what their future outlook is.
People with warm regard as the contact points. Being experts isn't necessarily that crucial as the first contact, but people with warm regard who are welcoming, that in itself will go miles and miles, because people remember how an experience makes them feel. And if you can create that contact point, and then from there conduit them into wherever the most appropriate place is, knowing that they've got that contact point to re-establish that warm regard. I think that's crucial. The first contact is crucial.
As she was dying in hospital, I discovered paperwork in her medical records. Somebody put in to not refer to her as her chosen name and to not use the appropriate pronouns. And I know for her, that was a big part of why she kind of neglected to seek additional care for cancer.
The standard of suicide rate in the general community is 8% for cisgendered people, and for trans people it's like 48%. So there's something wrong in our whole society, in our medical system. It has to be changed, and people die. People die every day because of this.
I'm really glad to see that we have funding for at least 4 assessors per health authority region. I don't know how feasible that is in practice. I hope it is.
It'll be good to see a permanent organisation set up here which will look after the future needs of future generations. I'll be happy to see it. I probably won't live long enough to see it, but you know, that's the way it is. We seem to be on the right track.
In this context, it means someone, it means self-identifying, someone that sees themselves on the trans spectrum, and then creating resources, healthcare delivery models that can set the bar, ideally, in my opinion, to the most marginalized, the most fragile, the most traumatized. Because frankly, people that are well-adjusted already, that happen to be trans as well, whatever that is, they're going to be fine. They have well-adjusted, they've got jobs, they can access the psychologists who will transition them quite quickly based on whatever their issues are. But if you set the bar to the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, and more particularly the most traumatized, if you can set the bar there, then you'll be able to include everyone.
To me, trans inclusion means using the proper gender pronouns, finding out how the person wants to be addressed by clinic staff, the receptionist. Even goes down to a blue folder or a pink folder. I mean, if a person's presenting as a woman, probably go for the she and the her, yeah. But there's the biggest growing group gender-wise these days is gender fluid, gender neutral, and that's the youth. My doctor, I've transitioned 3 years ago, but when I went to get my gender papers signed by her, I said, so what are my records in? Are they male or female? 3 years later, after I transitioned after work, they were still male. I said, so can we change this now? I'll have to confirm that, she said. So, inclusiveness, it's a process.
To me personally, it means people who, well, I suppose it's based on my own experience. As a childhood transsexual, long before the word was even understood and known. I was born in 1925. By 1927, I can remember showing manifestations of gender confusion with my parents and so forth. Didn't want my hair cutting short. I wanted it like the big girls. I didn't want to wear pants. I wanted to wear a dress. And all that. And of course, it caused a lot of consternation in 1927, believe me, when there was no knowledge of any of this stuff at all. And anyhow, under heavy threat from my father, I managed to, he didn't kill it, what he did, he drove it internal. It became an internalized thing. And from then on, and for the next, pretty much the next 60 years, it was a secret. I never told anybody about it. I lived with it. It was extremely intense at times. And I was so pleased when I eventually summed up the courage to really step out of my shell and let the world know that I was who I am.
We're the only group that I know of in BC that's specifically for trans youth, and so it would be amazing to have more groups around the province. I think at this point trans people haven't really been seen as people that are going to start families in that way and have babies, and I think it would be really important to talk to people about their options when they're looking at transitioning. So like for a trans man or on that spectrum, talking about freezing eggs or maybe holding off on a hysterectomy, because you can actually go on testosterone and then go off and have a baby. I know because I did it. And Another thing is chest feeding and breastfeeding. There's actually different surgeries that can allow for some chest feeding after surgery. And so if surgeons and people were to be more educated about that, they could tell people their options beforehand, so people could just be thinking about that. I think when they're transitioning, it's especially young people, I think they might not be thinking about that part of their life, but they might be later in the future, and just to have people be mindful of that, and I think it's really important.
I feel really positive about what PHSA is doing. I think that it's a really positive move and a really practical move to now usher the work that's been done to date by VCH into a broader arena, which I see PHSA, Provincial Health Services, as being. I think I'm really excited about what's happening here today, and that it's the call out has been so widespread.
Opinion matters.
That was TransCare BC with a clip asking people to share their thoughts and feelings about trans-related issues. Just a reminder that the health information we provide should never substitute that of your primary healthcare provider. You're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY Radio, broadcasting out of Nanaimo this holiday season. Well, we'll leave you with a sweet song from a local artist. Up next, we've got I Still Believe from the album Christmas Miracle by Nanaimo artist Chris Thompson of Venice.
Shoes for snow, but I'm done. My hat and my scarf and crown. Now I'm as far as my legs will go, 'cause I still believe in you. I still believe in you. I still believe in you. Give me rough and tumble, give me shallow regret. Give me kiss and fumble, give me love and give me that. Give me virtue, give me honest and discreet. Give me sweet and low down, give me low and filthy feet. I was blind before I met you, never seen your eyes. When we woke up I kissed you, what have we been doing with our lives? Will my eyes become yours? I've never seen your eyes before. When will your eyes become mine? We didn't meet till I was blind. 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 Oh, as far as my legs will go. Shoes for snow. But I'm done. My hat and my scarf and crown. Now I'm as far as my legs will go, 'cause I still believe in you. I still believe in you. I still believe in you. Rough and tumble, give me shallow regret. Give me kiss and fumble, give me love. I still believe in you. Give me virtue, I still believe in you.
That was I Still Believe from the album Christmas Miracle by Nanaimo artist Chris Thompson of Ah Venice. Check out Ah Venice on Bandcamp. And may you enjoy the time you spend with your loved ones this season. Best wishes from all of us at A Sound Constitution.
Thanks for listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY Radio.
For more information, questions, or comments, please visit our Facebook page at A Sound Constitution.
Tune in again next Thursday morning from 10 to 11.
Stay healthy, Vancouver Island.